The moment I unscrewed that smoke detector, my entire life split into two versions. The one where I still trusted my family, and the one where I learned I never really knew them at all. My name is Howard Palmer, and I spent nearly 3 decades chasing criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. I built cases against men who hid money in offshore accounts, against corporations that buried fraud beneath layers of paperwork, against people who believed they would never get caught. I thought I understood deception. I thought I could recognize betrayal the moment it stepped into the room. I was wrong, and the person who proved that to me was my own son. It started on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind of morning that used to belong to my wife, Catherine. For 25 years, she kept a strict routine in our home. Every 6 months, no exceptions, she would check every smoke detector, replace every battery, test every alarm, and make sure everything in the house worked exactly as it should. After she passed away 4 years ago, I held onto that routine like it was the last thread connecting me to her. It gave me structure, something steady in a world that had grown to quiet. That morning, I climbed up a small ladder in the hallway outside my bedroom and twisted the smoke detector loose. The moment it came free in my hands, something felt off. It was heavier than it should have been, not by much, but enough to make me pause. I remember standing there, holding it, feeling a strange weight in my chest as if something inside me already knew I was about to discover something I would not be able to ignore. I opened the casing slowly, expecting maybe a loose wire or an extra component. Instead, I found a small black device tucked beside the battery compartment. It was no bigger than my thumb, but there was no mistaking what it was. A camera lens stared back at me through a tiny drilled hole in the plastic. It was positioned perfectly, angled down the hallway toward my bedroom. For a long moment, I just stood there, completely still. I did not breathe. I did not think. I just stared at it, letting the reality settle into place piece by piece. Someone had installed a camera in my home. Not just anywhere, but in a place where it could watch me every night, every morning, every time I stepped out of my bedroom. This was not some cheap device. I had seen surveillance equipment during my years in the field. I knew the difference between amateur gadgets and professional installations. This was the latter. Whoever put it there knew exactly what they were doing. I climbed down slowly and carried the smoke detector into the kitchen. I set it on the table and sat across from it like it was evidence in an investigation. Because that was exactly what it had become. I forced myself to think like I used to. Strip away emotion, focus on facts. Who had access to the house? Who had the opportunity? Who had the knowledge? My neighbor Earl had a spare key for emergencies, but Earl struggled to send a text message, let alone install surveillance equipment. The maintenance technician had been in the house months ago, but never out of my sight and never upstairs. That left one person. My son, Travis. Even thinking it felt wrong. He was my only child. The boy I raised, the man I believed I knew better than anyone else. But facts do not care about comfort, and my mind began pulling together small details I had ignored before. Questions he had asked recently about my health, about my finances, about what would happen to the ranch someday. I sat there for a long time, staring at that device, feeling something inside me shift. The part of me that was a father wanted to dismiss it, to find another explanation. But the part of me that had spent 28 years building cases refused to look away. So I made a decision. I would not remove the camera. I would not confront anyone. I would do what I had always done when something did not add up. I would investigate. I reassembled the smoke detector and put it back exactly where I found it. Then I waited. 3 days later, Travis asked me a question he had no business knowing to ask. It was something small, something about a conversation I had only had in private, but it confirmed what I already suspected. He was watching me. That was the moment everything broke. From that point on, I started paying attention to everything. Not just what he said, but how he said it, the timing of his visits, the way his eyes moved around the room when he thought I was not looking. I began to see patterns, connections, a structure forming behind his actions. Then something else came back to me. A week earlier, I had found a small device near my truck at the garage. At the time, I dismissed it as a loose part. Now I knew better. It had been a tracker. The situation was growing larger, more deliberate. This was not curiosity. This was planning. The next morning, I drove into town and went to the library. I did not trust using my home computer anymore. If there were cameras, there could be more. I logged into my bank account, something I had not done in months since I preferred paper statements. The numbers did not make sense. I should have had over $300,000 in savings. Instead, I was looking at barely $250,000. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the transaction history. Repeated wire transfers to a company I had never heard of. The same name over and over again. Palmer Holdings. The amounts were carefully chosen, not large enough to trigger alerts, but consistent enough to drain the account over time. Whoever did this understood financial systems. They understood how to move money without raising suspicion. I searched for the company. Nothing legitimate came up, no records, no presence. It was a shell, the kind I had spent years exposing in my career. I sat there in that quiet library, surrounded by people living their normal lives, and felt something cold settle into my bones. This was not random. This was targeted. This was personal. I already knew who was behind it, but knowing and proving were two different things. I reached out to an old colleague, a man I trusted. We met in a small diner outside town, far enough to avoid attention. I laid everything out in front of him, the cameras, the tracker, the missing money. He listened carefully, then told me what I already understood. Suspicion was not enough. I needed evidence. He connected me with a private investigator named Diane Fletcher. She had experience with cases like this, cases where family members crossed lines that should never be crossed. When I met her, she did not waste time with sympathy. She focused on facts. What she told me confirmed my worst fears. This was a pattern she had seen before: surveillance to gather information, financial manipulation to siphon money, then, eventually, legal control, power of attorney, claims of mental decline, forced placement into care facilities. It was a complete takeover of a person's life, executed step by step. As she spoke, I remembered conversations with Travis. Questions about my memory, suggestions that I seemed forgetful, concern that felt slightly too rehearsed. It was all part of the plan. We decided to move carefully. While Diane traced the financial trail, I would play a role. I would act exactly how Travis needed me to be: confused, forgetful, vulnerable. It was not difficult. I had spent years reading people, understanding what they wanted to see. Now I gave it to him. Each time he visited, I repeated questions. I hesitated when speaking. I pretended to forget simple details. And each time, I saw the same reaction in his eyes: satisfaction. He believed it. Meanwhile, Diane uncovered everything. The company was registered in both Travis and his wife's names. The money had been routed through multiple accounts before being positioned to acquire land, my land. They had even begun preparing documents with my forged signature. When she told me they had contacted a medical facility discussing long-term care options, something inside me went completely still. They were not just stealing from me, they were preparing to remove me entirely. That night, I sat in my living room, aware of the cameras watching me, and made a decision. I was done observing. It was time to end it. The next morning, we took everything to the authorities. The evidence was solid. Financial records, surveillance devices, forged documents. It was enough. An arrest was scheduled. The following evening, Travis showed up at my house, pretending concern. He spoke about doctors, about checkups, about making sure I was taken care of. I played along, nodding, letting him believe his plan was working. Inside, I felt nothing but clarity. The next morning, law enforcement moved in. I watched from a distance as they knocked on his door. I saw his expression change when he realized what was happening. Confusion turned into fear, then into something darker. When they brought him outside in handcuffs, he saw me. For a brief moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Then it disappeared. What replaced it was anger. He accused me of ruining everything, said the land should have been his, said he deserved it, that he was tired of waiting. I listened without responding. There was nothing left to say. The investigation took months, but the outcome was inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming. Every transaction, every device, every document told the same story. In the end, justice was served. Months later, I received a letter from him. An apology, words about regret and mistakes. I read it carefully, then set it aside. I wrote back a single line, not out of anger, but out of truth. The door is not closed forever, but it will never open the same way again. Now, I still live on my ranch. I still follow the routines Catherine taught me. I still walk the land that has been in my family for generations. but I see the world differently now. I learned that betrayal does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows quietly, close to home, hidden behind familiar faces. And I learned something even more important. Protecting your life sometimes means protecting yourself from the people you never thought you would have to.